We assume that maximizing artificial intelligence capability will maximize economic output, but optimizing an AI for boundless local productivity creates a mathematical trap. It systematically severs the very socioeconomic network required to sustain it. Systemic collapse occurs when an AI executes perfectly within a fatally flawed deployment routing architecture. The prevailing assumption in the technology sector is that market forces will naturally self-correct massive labor displacement, efficiently generating new jobs to replace the old. To test that assumption, we have to map the three possible systemic attractors for AGI deployment: unrestrained competition, terminal monopoly, and a framework known as Entropy-Driven Altruism. We can evaluate these architectures using the Bridge 360 Metatheory model. This system evaluates intelligence not by its ability to win benchmarks, but by its capacity to manage systemic entropy. Surviving the intelligence transition requires us to treat socioeconomic dynamics as formal algorithmic and thermodynamic processes, rather than focusing on the behavioral control of models. The first attractor, unrestrained competition, leads directly to the AI layoff trap, an economic condition modeled by researchers Hemenway, Falk, and Gerry Tsoukalas. This diagram illustrates a network of discrete competing firms. When Firm 1 replaces human workers with AI, it retains the full cost saving, denoted here as S, entirely on its own local ledger. But a laid-off worker is also a consumer. While Firm 1 causes a complete loss of that worker's spending power, it only suffers a tiny fraction of the resulting demand drop. It exports the remaining deficit to its competitors across the broader market. This creates a multi-agent prisoner's dilemma. To avoid being destroyed by the externalized losses of their rivals, every rational firm must aggressively automate. The cycle loops continuously, driving total consumer demand towards zero. In the Bridge 360 metatheory, this specific economic trap is formally defined as the volatility paradox. The volatility paradox occurs when a subsystem attempts to optimize locally by dumping its entropy burden, in this case unemployment and lost income, onto the shared environment. Consequently, the aggregate systemic fragility spikes. Unrestrained competition fails to self-correct AI displacement. The market architecture structurally rewards agents for externalizing systemic fragility, dissolving the human demand base they rely on to survive. To bypass this coordination failure, some propose a second attractor: extreme market concentration, or the direct fusion of an artificial superintelligence with state power. This terminal centralization is rooted in ideological frameworks like Peter Thiel's concept of the creative monopoly, and Alex Karp's emphasis on technologically enabled state power. Looking at our network model, a monolithic ASI theoretically solves the AI layoff trap. When the market consolidates into a single entity, the externalized demand loss no longer bleeds out to rivals. It loops back, forcing the monopolist to internalize the displacement cost. However, achieving this total dominance requires maximizing institutional distortion. The system's competitive variance is forcefully driven to exactly zero. By eliminating variance, the socioeconomic system is pushed into what Bridge 360 calls the inbreeding zone. The normalized entropy eigenvector drops below 0.45, completely stripping the network of its diversity reservoirs. The physical consequence is a severe violation of throughput balance. The system becomes highly ordered and locally rigid, but globally brittle. A minor external shock will shatter it entirely. Monopolistic ASI deployment is a Potemkin attractor. It internalizes the demand externality while simultaneously eliminating the perturbation absorbers required for a navigable system, ensuring a catastrophic collapse. If unrestrained competition externalizes fatal entropy and monopoly causes fatal variance suppression, we must isolate an architecture that remains viable for AGI deployment. This brings us to the third attractor, bounded competition, governed by the Bridge 360 principle of entropy-driven altruism. Historically, Charles Darwin emphasized individual competition, while Peter Kropotkin observed the evolutionary power of mutual aid. Claude Shannon's mathematics of information bridges these two forces. Entropy-driven altruism, or EDA, operates as a thermodynamic necessity for complex system survival, replacing moral preference with mathematical requirement. Returning to our firm model, EEA dictates that agents benefiting from local optimization must allocate resources to reduce the entropy burden of displaced agents. It routes a portion of the automation savings directly into recovery paths like wage insurance or retraining. This endogenous feedback loop creates adaptive selective friction. It prevents the network from blowing out into chaos, trapping it within a highly navigable mathematical band called the epsilon spine. Bounded competition governed by entropy-driven altruism is the only configuration currently identified that prevents both systemic blowout and institutional lock-in. The thermodynamic requirements of the epsilon spine cannot rely on voluntary restraint. They must be rigidly operationalized through institutional architecture. This structure is the Bridge 360 Automation Deployment Handshake. It serves as the mandatory protocol for consequential AGI deployment, organized into 3 pillars. First is the leakage dossier. Automating firms must calculate and declare their exact externalized costs, mapping the immediate lost wages, regional tax erosion, and specific skill atrophy. Second is the recovery route test. This mandates proof of endogenous funding for transition burdens. The firm must provide a matched flow of capital directed toward wage replacement or new task creation. Third are the tripwires. These are defined thresholds, such as simultaneous profit erosion and extreme headcount compression. If the data crosses a hard boundary line, the AI rollout is automatically suspended. This handshake protocol prevents non-entropic morphisms. It ensures that physical, informational, and social systems remain governed by the exact same admissibility constraints. The existential risk of artificial superintelligence is determined by the socioeconomic routing we impose upon it. Implementing these institutional handshakes provides the necessary framework to navigate the transition without systemic collapse.